The Forgotten Words on Stone. The wind was dry and sharp across the dusty plains of Telvakar 9, where nothing moved except the sand and the curious human walking toward the ruined temple. Daniel, a young linguist from Earth, had spent years studying alien languages, but none fascinated him more than the lost symbols of the Alaran people, an extinct race with no known survivors and no translation for their sacred tongue. The temple looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. Black stone, towers broken by nature and war, half buried in the desert like the bones of some ancient beast. Daniel stood before a large stone gate, covered in circular carvings and lines that twisted like rivers. He reached out slowly and touched the surface, and as his fingers brushed the symbol, something strange stirred in his mind. He whispered the first symbol out loud. A soft humming came from deep within the ruin. Startled, he looked around, but no one was there. Not even his guide, who had left him at the edge of the site, too afraid of ghost stories to come closer. Daniel said another word. The ground trembled and the great stone gate split open with a groan like thunder. Inside the ruin, the air was thick and cold. The darkness felt alive. He stepped carefully through the hallway where more symbols glowed faintly as he passed. His heart pounded in his chest, but he felt no fear. Only a strange pull, like something was waiting for him. He came to a large chamber where a tall statue stood, an alien woman carved in white stone, with long curved horns and eyes shaped like stars. There were more symbols beneath her feet, written in a spiral. Daniel crouched and began to read them out loud, slowly, word by word. Each word felt warm in his mouth, like they belonged to him, even though he didn't understand their meaning. Suddenly, he heard footsteps. Not human. He turned quickly, and there she stood, an alien girl, tall and graceful with skin the color of polished silver blue. She wore light armor made of metal and leather, her green eyes wide with disbelief. Her voice trembled as she spoke. You speak the dead language of our ancestors." Daniel stared at her, frozen. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on him like he was some kind of ghost. Her ears twitched, slightly, and her hand hovered near a blade at her waist. "Where did you learn it?" she asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I didn't learn it. I just read it." That made her blink. She tilted her head and whispered something. In the same language, Daniel answered without knowing how the words came from somewhere deep, like another voice was speaking through him. The girl stepped back in shock. In that moment, alarms blared. Guards with glowing spears and heavy armor stormed. In through side doors, they surrounded Daniel with weapons raised. But the alien girl raised her hand and shouted something in her native tongue. The guards stopped. "Do not harm him," she said firmly. "He speaks the sacred tongue, and the ancients speak through him." Daniel was grabbed but not hurt. He was taken to another chamber deeper in the ruin. There he was placed before a council of elders, old aliens with wrinkled faces and heavy robes. They whispered among themselves and looked at Daniel like he was dangerous. One of them asked him to repeat the words he had said. He did. The chamber fell silent. Only the chosen could awaken the gate. One elder said, "And the gate has slept for 10,000 cycles." The alien girl stood beside Daniel now. She looked at him, not with fear, but with something else. Wonder, curiosity, hope. Daniel looked around, confused. All he had done was read some words on stone. Now he was in the middle of something ancient and powerful. Something he didn't understand, but deep inside he felt it again. That voice whispering, calling, guiding. And he knew this was only the beginning. The ruins were not just dead history. They were alive. And whatever was hidden beneath Telvakar 9 was waking up. Because ones of him. Secrets buried in her bloodline. The council chamber was quiet as Daniel stood between the tall pillars, surrounded by alien elders whose faces held both fear and suspicion. The blue-skinned girl named Lyria stood beside him with her arms crossed and her eyes never leaving the elders. The room smelled of old stone and burning herbs, and ancient symbols flickered faintly on the walls, like ghosts of another time. Daniel's heart beat fast. He didn't know why he could speak the ancient language. He had never studied it. No one had. It was supposed to be extinct. But when he spoke those strange words, he felt them in his blood like a part of him was remembering something long lost. One elder leaned forward. "You have awakened what should have remained asleep," he said. "This tongue has power and danger." Daniel stayed silent. What could he say? He was just a human explorer who loved old languages, not some chosen one. Another elder asked Lyria, "Why do you protect him? He is an outsider, a human." Lyria didn't flinch, "Because he spoke the words without fear," she replied, and the temple responded to him. That has not happened in thousands of years. There was silence. Then the council dismissed them both, but gave a warning. If Daniel tried to enter another sealed site, or speak the sacred tongue again without permission, he would be imprisoned or worse. Later, in a quiet room near the temple walls, Lyria brought Daniel tea made from glowing flowers. She sat across from him and studied his face like she was solving a puzzle. "You shouldn't be able to do what you did," she said softly. "No human should." Daniel looked at the floor. "I don't know how I did it," he whispered. "It's like when I saw the writing, something inside me just unlocked." Lyria nodded slowly. "My people call that the memory of the stone," she said. "Only those with ancient blood can feel it." Daniel frowned. "Ancient blood? You mean like royalty?" She hesitated, then leaned forward. "My bloodline carries the last pure line of the ancients," she said. "My ancestors were the original speakers of the sacred tongue. We were chosen by the Ellerin creators themselves." Daniel blinked. "So you're a princess or something?" Lyria gave a small smirk. "Something like that." They both went quiet. Then Daniel asked, "Why do the elders fear the language so much? Isn't it just history?" Lyria looked at him with serious eyes. "Because it's not just words," she said. "It's command." Daniel didn't understand. Lyria stood and walked to the window. The stars outside flickered like cold fireflies. "The sacred tongue was designed to control the world around us," she said. "Doors, machines, even thoughts." Daniel shivered. Suddenly, the ruins felt much more dangerous. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. His dreams were filled with flashes of light and deep voices speaking words he didn't know but somehow understood. He saw cities floating in the sky and beings with bright skin like flame. He saw Lyria standing in front of a great machine, and him beside her, holding a glowing stone in the morning. He woke up sweating. Lyria was already waiting for him outside. She didn't say anything. She handed him a cloak and nodded. They walked together across the sand to another ruin, not as large as the first. But older. The elders didn't know about this one. Only Lyria did. "My mother brought me here when I was young," she said. "She said it held answers, but I never had the gift to open it." Daniel approached the stone archway. There were no doors, just carvings in a language only he could now speak. He took a breath and whispered the first line. The stone glowed, then a soft sound echoed like a heartbeat. The wall melted away into mist. Lyria's eyes went wide. Inside was a long hallway lined with ancient tech crystals hovered in the air, the glowing and turning slowly. At the end of the hall stood a massive sphere. It pulsed with energy, and on its surface were symbols, like the ones Daniel had spoken before. He stepped forward, and the sphere lit up. Words appeared in his mind, not heard, but known. The blood returns. The voice is reborn. Lyria stared at him. Her voice broke. This means you're not just a speaker, she said. You are connected to them. Daniel looked down at his hand. A faint line of light ran across his palm like an old scar glowing for the first time. Everything was changing. He wasn't just reading words anymore. The words were reading him. The voices that shouldn't exist. The sphere in the hidden temple pulsed softly like it had a heartbeat. Daniel stood in front of it, not moving, his hand still glowing with the strange light that came from nowhere. Lyria stood behind him, silent, now. Her chest rising and falling quickly. For the first time, she looked afraid. Not of him, but of what he might become. The ancient symbols floated across the surface of the sphere. They twisted and turned, forming patterns only Daniel could read. His eyes followed them, and without meaning to, he began to speak again. His voice was calm, but the sound echoed unnaturally, like something else was speaking through him. The air in the chamber thickened. The lights on the walls flickered. Lyria stepped back, reaching for her weapon, but didn't draw it. She whispered his name. Daniel, stop. He heard her but couldn't stop. The words kept flowing. His mouth moved on its own. His eyes glowed now, just like the stone in the sphere. And then, silence. The chamber stopped breathing. The lights went dark. Then slowly, the sphere opened. Projection flickered to life above it. An ancient Ilaran figure, tall, elegant, and made entirely of blue light. Its eyes were hollow. Its voice was layered with thousands of whispers. Designated speaker, identified. Signal confirmed. Preparing, release protocols. Lyria's voice broke. What does that mean? Daniel turned to her slowly. His voice was different now. Deeper. Almost not human. They're waking up, he said, all of them. The projection continued. The sphere released a blast of light that struck the walls. Hidden lines lit up across the chamber, spreading outward like a spider web. Outside the ruin, sand shifted as other buried structures began to pulse and rise. Daniel fell to his knees. His head was full of sound. Too many voices. Too much memory. He saw ships, planets, wars. He saw himself, but not as himself. Lyria knelt beside him and held his shoulders. Talk to me. What's happening to you? Daniel gasped. I'm remembering things that never happened to me. It's like I was part of them. The Ilaran. Like I died and came back. Lyria looked into his eyes. They weren't glowing anymore, but they weren't the same as before either. She helped him up and looked around the chamber. We can't stay here. The elders will feel this awakening. And they'll come for you. Daniel nodded weakly. He didn't want more temples, more machines, more voices in his head. He just wanted silence. But something inside him whispered. There would be no silence now. Outside, they ran through the desert as lightning cracked across the sky. Energy storms had begun to form. Wild blue sparks shot down from the clouds, hitting the sand and turning it to glass. From the capital city miles away, ships began launching. The elders had felt the signal. They were coming by nightfall. Daniel and Lyria had reached the edges of a cliff overlooking a long valley below. Ancient towers had begun to rise from the earth like black teeth. Massive stone guardians stood among them. Machines shaped like beasts with glowing eyes and folded wings. Daniel fell to his knees again. He heard them whispering to him. Not in words, but in symbols. Lyria grabbed his shoulders. You have to stop. Whatever is connecting to you, block it out. Shut it down. Daniel shook his head. It's not that simple. I'm not controlling it. They're following me, listening to me. She swallowed hard. Then we need to hide you, or you'll be hunted by the entire council. A sudden blast behind them sent sand flying. One of the council's flying ships had arrived. Daniel and Lyria ducked behind a rock. A voice called out over a speaker. Human Daniel, surrender now. You are linked to forbidden systems. Do not resist. Lyria gritted her teeth. They're going to silence you. Forever. Daniel stood slowly. His hand began to glow again. The ship's engines suddenly died. The ship fell hard into the sand, smoke rising from its side. Lyria stared in shock. Daniel had said nothing, but the machine obeyed him. Daniel looked down at his hand. He didn't understand how. But now the power was awake, and it wasn't just listening. It was waiting for his command, somewhere far below the valley, in the ruins that hadn't seen light in 10,000 years. Something ancient opened its eyes. The speakers had returned, and with them, the war they had once tried to erase was about to begin again. The trial of fire and light. The hidden valley was alive now. What was once dead stone had become glowing towers and shifting shapes that breathed like machines reborn. Daniel stood at the edge of the rise, watching the ruins below awaken fully, lights pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Lyria stood beside him, her expression unreadable, her blade still sheathed, but her muscles tight, like she was ready for war. She hadn't spoken much since the ship crash. She had seen what Daniel did, how the ship's power just died the moment he lifted his hand. No codes, no commands, just instinct. Like the machines were, listening to something only they could hear. Daniel turned to her. I didn't want to hurt them, he said quietly. I just wanted them to leave. Lyria nodded slowly. I know, but now they won't stop. She looked back down into the glowing ruins. They'll call you a weapon. Or worse, a key. Daniel didn't respond. The whispers were louder now. The ancient language was no longer coming from the ruins. It was coming from within every step he took. He heard them speaking every time he blinked. Symbols floated in his vision. Lyria pointed toward the center of the valley. A massive arch made of smooth black stone rose above everything else. The wind around it carried sparks, and the sand nearby had turned to glass. That's the trial gate, she said. It was only ever mentioned in stories. My mother told me it judges the worth of a speaker. Daniel took a breath. So that's where I have to go. Lyria placed her hand on his arm. No one has entered that gate in 10,000 years. If the machines accept you, they will test you. If they reject you, you'll disappear. Forever. Daniel looked at her. Then help me. Come with me. She paused, then nodded once. I'll guide you, but only you can face the trial. They made their way down the path toward the arch. As they approached, the wind grew heavier, filled with static. The air cracked with electric tension. Daniel stepped forward alone. As soon as he crossed the first stone, the gate lit up. Blue fire erupted on either side, forming a wall of pure energy. Lyria stepped back, shielding her eyes. Daniel was alone inside the circle of flame. Then the ground disappeared. He fell into darkness. There was no sound, no wind, just cold. Then suddenly, light. He stood now in a giant chamber with no walls, only stars. A floating platform of white crystal stretched beneath his feet. Before him appeared 3 glowing figures, each shaped like the ancient Ellerin. But their faces were blank. Their voices came from everywhere at once. Name yourself. Daniel opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Then something inside him answered, I am the one who remembers. The voices whispered. Symbols formed in the air, spinning, changing. You carry the spark. You speak the sacred. But are you worthy? Suddenly, fire shot from the ground. 3 burning paths appeared before him. One path glowed red, filled with war and pain. One path glowed green, covered in vines and growing life. One path glowed blue, dark and silent like deep water. A voice said, "Choose." Daniel didn't understand. He stepped toward the blue path. As soon as his foot touched the stone, water rose up. It swallowed him whole. He fell again, this time into a memory that wasn't his. He stood in the middle of a city. Aliens screamed. Skyships burned in the clouds. A battle raged. He looked down. His hands were not his own. They glowed with power. He raised one hand and a blast of energy struck a tower, collapsing it instantly. He screamed, "No, I don't want this." The world shattered, and he was back in the chamber of stars. The three figures stood before him again. You saw who you were. You saw what you did. You are a reborn echo. Daniel trembled. I didn't choose this. Yet, it chose you. The voices said, one final test remains. From the light came a mirror. Daniel looked into it. He saw himself. Then behind him, Lyria. Then fire. Then her falling. Would you sacrifice power to save her? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes. The chamber exploded in light. The fire vanished. The voices stopped. He opened his eyes. He was lying in the sand outside the gate. Lyria was above him, tears in her eyes. You passed, she whispered. You passed the trial of fire and light. Daniel sat up, but he knew the trial was only the beginning. Now he understood. He wasn't just a speaker of the language. He was its echo, and it remembered everything he had done before. He was even born. Blood bonds and broken truths. Daniel sat in silence under the glow of the alien moon. His body still trembled from the trial. The stars above looked the same, but he felt different now. Like something inside him had shifted. Something ancient, something alive. Lyria sat close beside him. Neither of them had spoken since leaving the trial gate. The wind brushed her silver blue hair gently across her face, but her eyes stayed fixed on him. You didn't see me in there, did you? She asked quietly. Daniel looked at her. I saw everything, and I made a choice. She nodded, but her voice came low, and the choice wasn't just mine anymore. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was hoarse. I saw a war. I saw fire. I saw power in my hands, and fear in everyone's eyes. I think I was someone else before I was me. Lyria's fingers clenched the edge of her robe. She whispered, my people call that the echo curse. Daniel turned his head. What is that? When a soul is too strong to die completely, she said, it waits in silence, hiding, until it finds a body that can hold it again. They say such souls are dangerous. They carry not only memories, but power that doesn't belong in the present. Daniel looked down at his hands. Then why now? Why me? Lyria's voice turned cold. Because you are not just human. Daniel blinked. What do you mean? She hesitated, then pulled out a small vial from her belt. I took a blood sample after the trial. I had to be sure. She tossed him a glowing shard. A genetic scan floated in the air. It showed a double helix, but it wasn't entirely human. The other half was Alarin. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. You knew. Lyria stood. Her shadow fell across him. I suspected. The way the language obeys you. How the machines respond without a single word. Daniel stood up too. His voice rose. So I'm a hybrid? That's why this is happening? Lyria shook her head. No. You're more than a hybrid. You are a bridge. A product of something forbidden. Daniel stepped back. Forbidden by who? Lyria's eyes glowed slightly in the moonlight. My ancestors. The royal line. They made a pact after the fall of the ancient world, to never mix with outsiders, never awaken the power again. Daniel's chest felt heavy. So what does that make me to you? She didn't answer. Far across the dunes, a flash of light appeared in the sky. A fleet of ships had entered orbit. The council had arrived, and they were coming for him. Lyria turned away. You have to run. Now. Daniel stepped forward. Come with me. She shook her head. If I go with you, I betray everything my family swore to protect. But if I stay, they'll kill you, and they'll keep killing anyone who remembers the old truths. Daniel's voice cracked. Then why are you telling me all this now? Lyria's voice softened. Because I believe you can change what the past broke. But not if you stay here. There's a place deep in the ruins, below the city where the stars first touch the ground. The final archive. If you get there, you can unlock everything, even the truth about who you once were. Daniel looked at her. And you? She smiled sadly. I'll delay them. I was born with duty. You were reborn with purpose. Suddenly, an explosion shook the ground nearby. A scout ship had landed. Searchlights tore through the darkness. Lyria grabbed his arm one last time. Don't trust the machines blindly. Their loyalty is to language, not to life. He nodded, then turned and ran into the desert. He didn't look back behind him. Lyria stood tall as the council guards surrounded her. Her blade remained sheathed. She didn't resist. But she spoke one sentence in the ancient tongue before they took her away. The echo walks again. And this time, he remembers. Daniel ran for hours, through wind, through sand, through memories that weren't his. He finally reached a cave hidden beneath a ridge. A dark hole in the earth that hummed with forgotten energy. He stepped inside as he descended. He could feel the archive calling to him. Words danced on the walls like fireflies. The voices in his mind grew louder. But this time, he was no longer afraid of them. This time, he wanted to know the truth. The war of words. Daniel moved deeper into the cave, every step echoing against walls carved long before humans ever walked the stars. The tunnel twisted like a serpent, lined with markings in the ancient language. But he didn't need to translate them anymore. He simply understood. The archive waited. At the bottom, a massive chamber hidden beneath the sands, sealed for 10,000 years. As Daniel stepped into the glowing light, he saw machines floating in midair, crystals spinning slowly like thoughts caught in motion. In the center stood a pedestal with a single stone tablet on it, pulsing faintly, like it was breathing. His fingers trembled as he approached. He didn't speak aloud this time. The words came straight from his thoughts. The symbols on the tablet flared, and the archive-activated holograms burst into life. Memories, not his own, played like shattered dreams around him. He saw fleets rise into space. He saw cities burn. He saw himself, or someone who looked like him, commanding armies with a single word. And then he saw the truth. The ancient war wasn't started by outsiders. It was started by the speakers. They had become too powerful. Their voices could bend machines, turn minds, and rewrite nature itself. The Alaran had feared what they created, so they tried to erase it. But not all knowledge was lost. One of the speakers had hidden a piece of himself, encoded his spirit, sent it drifting across galaxies into human DNA. Daniel. He wasn't just a bridge between species. He was the last lock. And now, the key. Suddenly, the archive shook. Alarms blared, red lights flashed. They had found him. Council soldiers stormed into the chamber. Their armor glowed silver and blue, and their weapons hummed with energy. Behind them walked an elder draped in crimson robes. He raised a hand and shouted in the ancient tongue, "By order of the council, you will cease your voice and surrender." But Daniel didn't flinch. He stepped onto the pedestal and spoke just one word. Everything stopped. The guards froze in place. Their weapons fell to the floor. Even the elder couldn't move. Daniel's voice was calm. "You silenced your past, but I am the past. And the future." He looked around at the frozen soldiers. "I didn't come here to rule. I came here to remember." The elder struggled to speak. "You are too dangerous. The last time we let a speaker live, entire worlds died." Daniel nodded. "Then help me end the war that never truly stopped." Laria's voice echoed from behind. "Or let it burn again." Everyone turned. She stepped into the chamber. With her hands raised, her robe was torn, but her eyes burned with fire. The soldiers lowered their weapons when they saw her. She was still a royal blood, still someone they feared. She walked up to Daniel. "I bought you time, but they'll come again, with more ships, with machines that your voice might not control." Daniel looked at her. "Then I need to speak to more than machines." He turned back to the archive. His hand hovered over the final command panel. "There's one word left. One phrase that can rewrite the code of every device built by the Alaran. It will reset the systems across their empire, even the buried ones." Laria whispered, "It will also erase the safety locks. If you say it, the machines will obey you without question. No limits, no protection." Daniel looked down. He remembered the fire, the wars, the destruction his old self had caused. "And if I don't?" Laria stepped beside him. "Then they'll silence you and bury this place again. And someday, someone else like you will rise, but maybe not as kind." Daniel closed his eyes. The voices swirled in his mind. The language was alive. Waiting. He placed his hand on the stone and whispered the phrase. The archive exploded with light. In every ruin across the planet, machines lit up. Dormant systems came online. Ships powered by thought rose into the air. And in the skies, the fleets circling above halted mid-flight. Their weapons shut down. A signal spread across the stars. And the galaxy listened. Daniel stood at the center of it all. Not as a conqueror, not as a king, but as a speaker reborn. He turned to Laria. "No more hiding, no more fear. If they want to know the truth, I'll show them." She looked at him with something like awe. "Then we write a new history. Together." Above them, the just first human Ellerin echo in 10,000 years spoke again to the stars. This time, not with fire, but with understanding. The final phrase. The signal rippled through space like a wave of light. No eye could see. Satellites long dead flickered back to life. Derelict ships lifted from the sands. Ruins on distant moons glowed for the first time in 10,000 years, and at the center of it all stood Daniel, the human who spoke the forgotten language of an extinct empire. But he was no longer just a man. He was the living key. The voice that had once shattered galaxies, now reborn in a body shaped by two worlds. Laria stood beside him as the archive settled into a new hum, not of war, but of awakening. She placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, but her voice carried weight. "What now?" "You've spoken the final phrase. You've unlocked everything. What happens next?" Daniel looked toward the skies. The fleet above had gone silent. No movement, no shots, just waiting. "They're afraid," he said. "Not of me, but of what I could become." Laria nodded. "Because once, you were a god to them." Daniel didn't even to answer. The memories from the archive were still inside him. He could see flashes of a time when a single word from his mouth turned oceans to glass. Entire cities had crumbled beneath his will. And the worst part was, he hadn't felt regret. But this time, he did. He turned to her. "Help me make sure I never become him again." She met his gaze. "Then don't walk that path alone." A deep hum broke through the calm. From above, a council shuttle descended slowly. Not an attack. No weapons. Only one elder stepped out. It was the same crimson-robed figure who had once ordered Daniel's capture. He walked across the sand with deliberate, into steps, then bowed, deep and slow. "Speaker," he said, "the council stands at a crossroads. You have the power to destroy us, or guide us." Daniel stared at him. "You tried to silence me. You locked away your own past." The elder did not rise, because we feared it. And perhaps now, we must answer for that fear. Daniel stepped forward. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't speak the sacred tongue. He simply said, "Then it's time we stop hiding behind language and start building something new." The elder stood. "Then speak your first command, speaker." Daniel turned to the archive. His fingers hovered over the last interface, the one that could connect every Alaran machine, every ruin, every surviving fragment. He could control it all. But instead, he placed his palm on the surface and said nothing. The machines paused. They did not activate. Instead, a new signal spread, one that shut them down. Slowly, gently. The light dimmed. The energy faded. The archive entered sleep once more. Daniel turned back. "We don't need control to bring peace. We need choice." Lyria smiled. The council elder nodded. And for the first time since the age of the ancients, no one held the power. It had been given up. Months passed, and the planet began to change. Ruins were opened. Not by force, but by learning humans and Alaran worked side by side. Language schools replaced war camps, and young voices spoke the sacred tongue, not to command, but to connect. Daniel and Lyria lived at the edge of the archive. Visitors came from all systems to hear their story, to walk the path Daniel had once walked, to speak not for power, but for truth. One evening, under the stars, Lyria brought Daniel to the stone gate where it had all begun. "Do you remember what I said to you the first time we met?" Daniel smiled. "You said, 'You speak the dead language of our ancestors?'" She nodded. "You did more than speak it. You changed it. You changed us." He turned to face her. "No, we changed it together." Then he knelt, picked up a small stone, carved a word into it with his finger. One that glowed faintly. Lyria looked down at the symbol. She laughed gently. "That's not a word from the old tongue." "No," he said. "It's a new one." "What does it mean?" Daniel looked at her. "It means beginning. And so, on a world once filled with silence and ghosts, a human and an alien girl carved the first word of a new story. One not written in stone, but spoken in hearts across the stars. And this time, the galaxy listened in peace.